Tonight's featured speaker, Bill Whittle, is making his second visit to the Conservative Forum. His previous appearance was in May of 2013, just under 2 years ago. That was a few months after the electoral disaster of November 2012, when Barack Obama was returned to office for another 4 years. At the time of Bill's visit, I was still depressed. Bill had a nice metaphor for what had happened in that election. He said it was as though the captain of the Titanic, after realizing an iceberg had gouged a hole in his hull, backed up to take another run at the iceberg. This time with a head full of steam. I think that was the first time I had laughed since that November. Of course, the election this past November, 2014, went a little better for those of us here tonight. And I'm pleased to be able to welcome Bill back at a more auspicious time. A time when conservatism, if not exactly in the ascendancy, is at least no longer in a defensive crouch. A time when voters have decisively rejected the statist free spending policies of the left. A time when our leaders could do worse than to look to people like Bill Whittle for ideas. A visit to Bill's website, billwhittle.com, reveals a wealth of such ideas. He has posted videos on such topics as gun rights, education, terrorism, the economy, Ebola. I could go on and on. But Bill's great ideas aren't just about better policies. He also understands how to communicate those policies and how to persuade those who do not currently support our principles to reconsider their position. He understands how the left has used its dominance over some of our most prominent institutions, entertainment, education, the news media, to fool young people into believing in the progressive vision of a nanny state that tells its own citizens what they can and cannot do, but fails to defend its vital interests overseas. And he has some fascinating ideas on how to turn the tide, to make conservatism not just right, but cool. To make young people who fashion themselves as socialists realize that at heart they really are, like the rest of us, self-interested capitalists. A writer, blogger, film director, TV editor, and instrument-rated pilot, Bill is a man of many talents. But most importantly, he's an articulate, outspoken defender of conservative principles. Please help me give a warm welcome to Mr. Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. I like to get this a little closer to me in case I decide to pick up a little religion tonight, give a chance to take a step back so I can hear how loud I'm actually being. It's a pleasure to be back up here. You know, last time I was up here, I didn't realize how close I actually was to Berkeley, and this time I did. And I was somewhat surprised that my skin didn't burst into flames, but apparently I'm just a degree or two warmer than I would be otherwise. And it's actually great to be up here. We have a large problem ahead of us. Many times when we talk about problems out there in the real world, we talk about the problems of demographics. We talk about the problems of demographics in terms of the West disappearing, just demographically disappearing. And we certainly have a problem as conservatives in terms of the demographics of the country. Ever since things like civics and history were removed from high schools, history as we know it today, we face the fact that younger and younger people are becoming more and more left-wing. It's not an accident that they're not taught about our founding principles, because if they were, they wouldn't be so left-wing, but they're not taught about them, and so they are becoming more left-wing. And what we see when we look out at conservatism today is we see a group that seems to be getting older. This particular room isn't too bad, but I've been at Tea Party events where I've looked out in the crowd and the average age is, deceased. And that's a problem. That's a serious problem. So, in order to understand that problem, in order to do something about that problem, and in order to start making some traction with young people who are, in fact, actually extremely conservative, we have to be able to understand something. We have to understand this in our bones, and we are very reluctant to understand this in our bones. We have to understand that people don't vote the way they think. They vote the way they feel. And this is true for all of us, and that's not a bad thing. I know a lot of people look down on that, but our feelings are our core emotions. These are our core values. Feelings are what really drives our personalities. And if people vote the way they feel, and they feel bad about conservatives, then they're going to vote for liberals just because they don't like us. And that's really the simplicity of the problem we find ourselves in today. We don't get the votes because we're perceived as being the villains. I'll give you a very interesting example. Exit polling after the election of Mitt Romney. Exit polling, not forecasting or models. People coming out of voting booths after the election of 2012 said that Mitt Romney won significantly on the issue they considered most important, which was the economy. He won on defense. He won on job creation. As a matter of fact, Mitt Romney, in exit polling after the 2012 election, won on virtually every single question that people asked, with one exception. And the one exception where Mitt lost by, I think it was something like 89% in favor of Obama, was who do you think cares more about you? Romney won on the economy, defense, job creation, everything else. Who do you think cares more about you? Obama carried that with 89%, 91%, something like that. And that's why they voted the way they did. Because Mitt Romney had been turned into a villain. And I'm up here to tell you about the power of story today, because if we don't understand the power of story, we're never going to win elections against these weenies and these losers and these, kind of weaklings and kind of, the kind of kids that were at the student council meetings always telling you, if you just vote for me, I'll give you longer recess. Get out of my face. I don't need you people telling me what to do. We're going to keep losing to these weenies if we don't understand the power of story and if we don't understand the power of pop culture. Before Mitt Romney even got into the fight, he was the villain. And people don't vote for the villains. Best entrance of a villain I ever saw was in a movie called Star Wars. I saw it on the roof of a station wagon in 1977. You see this tiny little ship of Rebel Alliance, this giant, huge web of the Empire, this vast, enormous force fighting this tiny little group of individuals trying to escape. You get inside the spaceship, you see the individual Rebel troopers, and they're actual humans with actual faces, and they're nervous and they're scared because they know they got a big fight coming. The hatch blows at the end there. Out come these white stormtroopers in these plastic outfits, looking like living skeletons with masks that suggest actual skulls. Skeletons coming out of this red gaping hole, killing these individual people. And after a few moments of this 7.5-foot tall creature dressed in black with a black cape, with a Nazi helmet on, with a mask that looked like a living skull, and breathing like some kind of artificial monster robot, steps out of the gates of hell. And I turned to the person sitting next to me and I said, "I bet you that's the bad guy. I bet that's the bad guy." You will not vote for the villain. You won't. And Mitt Romney let himself be demonized and vilified. You can't unvilify yourself. All you can do is make the other guy a villain too. If he had gone after his opponent and shown why he was a villain, then you'd have two villains, and then people would have their choice of which one of these two villains has the best policies. We would have won the election. But that didn't happen because we don't understand the power of story. We don't understand the power of what they did when they said that Mitt Romney is a vampire who causes cancer in his employees, who wants to put women in binders and ship their lady parts to China. By the time the debate started, he was already Darth Vader and the election was already over. If we don't understand the power of this, we're never going to win again. And I don't want to lose to these people. If we're going to lose the country, can't we at least lose it to people with machine guns and tanks, or somebody you can respect, Nazis maybe, or communists? Do we have to lose the country to these jug-eared, narcissist weenies just because they can tell a story and we can't? I'm not So, we have to understand the power of story, and we have to understand the power of how the left gets its message into people's hearts. They don't do it through websites. They don't do it through pamphlets or brochures. They don't do it through speeches. This is going to come as a shock to you, but the young people who vote for Barack Obama have never, ever, ever listened to a speech of Barack Obama. I assure you that this is the case. They've never listened to the State of the Union address, and if you ask them what his policies were, they couldn't tell you. They voted for Barack Obama because Jay-Z and Beyonce vote for Obama, and because George Clooney votes for Obama, Lady Gaga votes for Obama, and everybody that they do like and admire votes for Obama, so that's why they vote for Obama. It's the power of the pop culture. And if you don't understand how powerful the pop culture actually is, I'm about to give you a short education. So, let's play a little game. Let's say that I was a political operative and I had the kind of control over your brain space so that if I could start a sentence, you could finish that sentence for me. If I knew you well enough so that I could start a sentence and you could finish it for me, I'd have you, right? I would have your heart and mind, and you do anything I wanted you to. So, we're going to do it 3 times because we have 3 different age groups in here. So we're going to do it 3 different times. Here's how we're going to start. I'm going to start a sentence. You're going to finish it for me. Here's the power of the pop culture. We ready? Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane. It's Superman.
It's a plane. It's Superman. Exactly. Now, let's go a little bit younger. Just sit right back and hear a tale of a fateful trip. Started from this aboard this tiny ship. Right. Now we have a couple of young people in the back getting ready to make a hasty escape, and I don't blame them. That's where I'd be sitting if I was up here too. But this is for the 4 or 5 of you out there who are a little bit younger than the rest of us. I'm a young man with a conservative, but I'm 55. I'm over half a century old. We got real problems here. Ready, young people? Here we go. This one's for you. It seems today that all you see
is violence and movies and sex on TV.
Okay, so what have we just done there? I've started the theme to the Superman TV show, I've started the theme to the Gilligan's Island TV show, and I've started the theme to the Family Guy TV show, and none of you had to go to a website, none of you had to read a program, and none of you had to go and look it up on the internet. You knew the end of those things because you had seen them hundreds, if not thousands of times. You had taken them into your brain in a way that you don't take in things when you read or when you get a pamphlet. The suspension of disbelief drops. There stands, who was it, George Reeves, in a badly made suit, and he leaps through a building and he's flying, and you believe it. And because you believe it, it goes into a deep part of your brain. We call this the willing suspension of disbelief. So, if you're one of those people that can finish, look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman. You could do that because Superman got into your heart. He got into your heart. You didn't even know it. You didn't even know that you knew it. And everything associated with Superman got into your heart as well. Because Superman is America. Superman was a positive view of America. Superman, as a point of fact, is a God who lives on Earth, who is unlimited in power and is only inhibited by his own moral decency. That's what America is, and his motto is, I stand for truth, justice, and the American way. The virtuous control of unlimited power went into your heads when you watched Superman. That's the political message that came with Superman. And if you can say, look up in the sky, it's a bird plane, it's Superman, everything about America that Superman represents is in your heart, and that's why you could finish that sentence. Now, I'm a little younger. I remember seeing Superman as a little boy. But I grew up in the time of Gilligan's Island. Now, Gilligan's Island's not a very political show. Frankly, about the only thing you can learn from Gilligan's Island is if you want to get off the island, all you really have to do is kill Gilligan. You'll be off next week. Really, just kill Gilligan, and your problems are over. You're rescued the very next week. So not a lot of political message in Gilligan's Island. However, there's a lot of political message in Family Guy. And for those young people out here who can finish the theme of Family Guy, know that all of the anti-capitalist message, the anti-American message, the anti-Christian message, the anti-conservative message that comes into that show every single week is as deep in their heads as Superman is in yours. We are paying people to put those messages into the minds of our kids, and they can recite this stuff in their sleep. They don't have to go to the Family Guy website to figure out what these messages are. It's in the bloodstream. So this is an example of the power of the pop culture, because the pop culture is not just a fish in the ocean. Controlling the pop culture is not just getting a big fish in the ocean. Controlling the pop culture is not just landing a whale in the ocean. The pop culture is the ocean. Every political issue that we face in the country today swims in the pop culture. It's everything. It's the air that we breathe, and we have to get into this battle space. We have to get it in the way to win. We have to get into this space. We have to be able to control our messaging. Now, when I talk about messaging, I'm talking about the rapper. I want to be crystal clear on this. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, about the conservative ideals and message that I would change. Not a dot or a comma. Not a dot or a comma. I think the Constitution is, I have a religious awe about that document, because not because of its divine inspiration, which we can discuss, but because of the amount of work that went into it, the amount of work, the amount of study, and the amount of history, and the amount of constant debate, the work it took to produce that. So I'm not talking for a second about changing the message, but I am talking seriously about changing the package that we put that message in. Because the left is succeeding with the worst political message of all time. It's a message of collectivism and tyranny and dependency and envy and bitterness and hopelessness and entitlement and all of that stuff. But they're putting it in a Cartier diamond box. And we've got the most brilliant diamond message in the history of the world, and we're selling it in a greasy Kentucky Fried Chicken box, and we're wondering why nobody's buying it. Well, no one's buying it because we don't know how to sell it. And frankly, folks, if you're a politician on the right and you can't sell freedom to people, you're probably in the wrong line of work, honestly. How hard is it to sell freedom, virtue, and private property to people in this country? If you can't do that, you really need to find another line of work. So, let's get down to the actual message, and then we'll talk about the packaging. And I know I make this joke every time, but on behalf of our C-SPAN viewers, Marco Rubio, God bless you. I don't know what I'd ever done without you. Seriously, it's thirsty work up here. He gave his career to make it safe for lecturers to drink in the middle of a speech. So what's the message? Well, what is it that we believe? What do we believe? We've got pamphlets, we've got brochures, we've got constitution things, we've got websites, we've got all kinds of things. What do we believe? The simpler it is, the better. As far as I'm concerned, a simple message is better than a hard one. You know, when Albert Einstein determined the relationship between matter and energy, the relationship between matter and energy could have filled 60 blackboards with equations. Could have been this astonishingly complex deal. But when he said, no, E equals mc squared 4 operatives, he knew that he was on the truth, because it was so simple, it had to be true. It was so beautifully simple, it had to be true. So what is it we're selling? What is the message of our conservative view of America? What is it? I think it's 3 things and 3 things only. This is what we need to sell, and then we'll talk about how to sell it. We need to sell freedom, we need to sell private property, and we need to sell virtue. So, how do we do that to young people today? Well, the young people don't know anything about these terms. They've never been told anything about the founders, how all this stuff was worked out. They don't know anything about the Roman Empire and how it started as the Roman Republic. No, we got to start from scratch. So if we say freedom to young people, all they hear is freedom. Well, of course there's freedom. Everybody's free. The world is free. Everybody's free. We're all free. No. Freedom's a little bubble that's maintained by men and women who sign on the dotted line, put their lives at risk to keep that world of horror away from this little Disneyland of freedom that we live in, but they don't appreciate that. So when we talk about selling freedom to young people, we have to get down to the brass tacks that they understand. And really, when you get down to it, folks, if you want to sell freedom to young people, it's pretty simple. Freedom just means, do you want to be left alone, or do you want to be told what to do? Which one? And if you go to a group of college students anywhere, including Berkeley or anywhere else, and you say to them, do you want to be left alone, or do you want to be told what to do? They'll all say they want to be left alone. I can't remember where this was. It was either the University of Toronto or Oberlin. I'm pretty sure it was Oberlin, not positive. It very likely was Oberlin. Oberlin, for those of you who don't know, is Oberlin College, the most liberal college in America. Oberlin is where freedom and logic go to die. And I was in a room full of students at Oberlin, I think it was Oberlin, and arena seating, and reasonably full crowd. And I said, how many of you out there think you're socialists? And about 7 out of 10 raised their hands. About 7 out of 10. So I said to them, all right, well, you're socialist. I'm a capitalist. What is your core belief? What's your core tenet? What do you really believe in? Well, you asked them to define what they believed in as socialists. They couldn't tell you. And after a time, I kind of said, you know, it's not really my job to argue your position for you, but I'll do it anyway because I got a little time on my hands. Aren't you basically saying from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs? Yes, that's socialism. So we'll come back to that in a second. So if you look at this group full of students in Oberlin, you say to these liberals, and we don't want to use that word anymore, these progressives, these collectivists at Oberlin or right over at Berkeley, and you just ask them, say, listen, put aside all the labels, put aside the R's and the D's, Republicans, Democrats, all that stuff, put it aside. Raise your hand if you want to be left alone. And they will. Now raise your hand if you want to tell people what to do. Raise your hand if you're the kind of person that likes to tell other people what to do. Now some of them do want to tell other people what to do, but none of them will raise their hands. So, if you want to be left alone, that means you value freedom. So which party is the party about being left alone? Well, who is it that's trying to tell you that you have to have a certain kind of health care that is only approved by a certain number of people? And who's telling you, no, there should be thousands of choices in health care? Which party is telling you that you have to wear a safety helmet when you take a shower? And the other one is saying, no, man, if you want to get out there and ride your bike out and go out there and do it. Which party is talking about loud guns and fast cars and hot women? And which party is the party constantly trying to tell you, you have to have this kind of car, this is your temperature setting, this is what's going to happen, this is what you've got to do? Which party are the party of the weenies saying, no, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, can't do that, can't do that? And the other party saying, hey man, you know, get out of my face and leave me alone. If you want to be left alone, and you don't want to tell other people what to do, then don't you want the smallest government possible? Because they're the only people that can wield guns, you know. If you don't like McDonald's, don't go to McDonald's. But if you don't like what the government's doing and you don't want to pay them their money, sooner or later people with guns will show up and they will take their money by force. So if you don't like being told what to do, wouldn't you be in favor of reducing to the smallest possible size the only thing out there that can actually force you into doing what you don't want to do? Yeah. Congratulations, you're a third of the way to being a conservative. Very simple. Do you want to be left alone? Yes, me too. Congratulations, we're on the same page. Now, private property is a little tougher sell because wealth has been demonized by the left because the left's entire reason for existence, the reason they obtain political power, is by saying to some people, vote for me, and we'll use the power of the guns of the government to take stuff from those people and give it to you. So wealth has to be demonized, because if wealth is not demonized, if wealth is in fact a reward for hard work and more hard work, then taking that is stealing. And stealing's wrong. We don't want to be thieves, do we? No. So wealth has to be unearned, and it has to be demonized, and they have to take more than their fair share, which is what justifies stealing it from them and giving it to other people. So, it's a little tougher with the private property, but you can pull this off too, and here's how I did it. You have a group full of students who claim that they're socialists. 70% of them raise their hands and they're socialists. So I would say to them, okay, fair enough, socialists. What kind of phone do you have? I've got an iPhone 5, and I'm going to get the 6 as soon as my plan kicks in, get the upgrade. But I've got an iPhone 5. What do you guys have? And they'll tell you, at first they look at you a little suspiciously, like, what do you want to know about whatever. I said, I'm not going to steal them from you. I'm not a Democrat after all. I'm just curious. And then they'll tell you. And I say, all right, those of you who are socialists, not the capitalists, just the socialists, bring those smartphones down. Why do you want our phones? Well, you were the ones who said, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, right? That's what you believe, right? I don't believe that, but you believe that. You're the socialist. So bring down the phones, because given the number of people here who identify as socialists, we bring these phones out, we're going to have $2,000 worth of electronics down here. And we're going to put them in a little basket. Now, I'm not going to take them. Like I said, I'm not the government. I'm not a collectivist. Together, we're going to take your cell phones, and when we're done, we're going to go to downtown Cleveland. We're going to find a pawn shop, and we're going to take these phones, and we're going to liquidate them. We're going to sell them for $2,000. That's $120 bills. And then we're going to go through the streets of Cleveland, and we're going to distribute that money to the poor, because we're going to take from each according to his ability and give to each according to his need. Bring them down. And guess what? They don't bring them down. You know why? It's because they're not socialists, that's why. It's because they're rock-ribbed, William F. Buckley conservatives who believe in this idea of wealth redistribution so long as it's somebody else's wealth being redistributed to them, but when it's time for them to take their wealth and redistribute it to other people, all of a sudden they think Ronald Reagan is a swell guy. And that is where you can put people in a position where they have to put their money where their mouth is. Of course they're in favor of wealth redistribution. You're college students. You don't have any wealth to redistribute. You want other people to give you stuff, and you will until you start getting jobs and start paying taxes, at which point your opinion will change. And that's normal. This is, in fact, my phone. It's mine. I don't owe this phone to anybody. You know why I have this phone? I have this phone because I work like a slave is why. I get up every day. I work 7 days a week. I work very, very hard, and this is one of the benefits of the extra work that I do that I don't have to do. I earned it. It's mine. It's my phone. Mine. technically they're your parents, but we're not going to split hairs. But you can actually call them on it. You can make them, you can put them on their moral code. Make them live up to their own moral code. I will say to some of these students, they'll say, well, you know, wealth and this and so on and so forth. Say, listen, you have an Xbox, right? You have an Xbox, you have a PlayStation, you got something, right? I know gamers when I've seen gamers. I'm a gamer too. I know you're out there playing Call of Duty. I know you're playing all these games. So let's just remember one thing here. The poorest Americans are richer than 93% of the rest of the population of the earth. That toy that you go home to every night, if you were to take that toy to the pawn shop and sell that toy, you could probably feed a village in Africa for a year. And you don't. You don't. You say you would, but you don't. None of you do. You're all hypocrites. It's your property, you want it, you want to keep it, you feel like you've earned it, you probably have. But you could take that Xbox and sell it for $300, ship that money over to Africa, and feed a family certainly for a year. And you don't. Because you're not socialists. Because you understand that these things are products of the life that you lead, and your willingness to be charitable is not determined by whether or not somebody has a gun to your head. That's not charity. You can get people, young people, to understand the value of private property when you ask them if they're going to be willing to sell any of theirs in order to live up to their valuable, incredibly advanced moral superiority. And the answer is they won't do it. Because they're not socialists. They're regular people, just like us, who feel that if they work hard, they should be entitled to a reward for that work. Pretty simple, really. Third thing you need to sell, and the last thing you need to sell, is virtue. Now you say virtue to young people, and they think that means not having sex till you're 70. But that's not what virtue means. Virtue is very simple. Virtue is very simple. Virtue just means don't be a jerk. When I'm talking to college kids, I say don't be a dick. It's the same basic thing. Don't be a jerk, okay? Don't be a jerk. That's all virtue is. It is don't be a jerk. Do you think, raise your hands out there, college students of America, raise your hands if you think you have the right to hit somebody or the right to take what's in their backpack right now. Do you have the right to take what's in that person's backpack, yes or no? No, of course not. I agree. You'd be kind of a jerk if you hit them and or took their stuff. So if you don't believe in hurting people and hitting people, and you don't believe in taking their stuff, then that means that you're virtuous. And the cool thing about that is, if you're virtuous, then we can leave you alone. Remember how you said you wanted to be left alone? Swell. If you're not a jerk, we can leave you alone. Because if you behave without hitting people and taking their stuff, we can let you do whatever you want to do, limited only by the point where you start to hurt people or take their stuff. If you're not a jerk, we can leave you alone. However, if you are a jerk, and you do want to steal from people and take their stuff or hurt them, now all of a sudden we need policemen and we need cameras and we need parole officers, we need wardens, we need prison guards, we need the whole thing that is necessary to stop some of you from being jerks. And I don't know why the rest of us all have to pay that penalty because some of you are jerks. I think we ought to deal with those of you that are jerks and leave the rest of us alone. That's what I think. And that's virtue. And congratulations, you're 3/3 of the way. You're all the way there. You are, in fact, a rock-ribbed conservative because you have understood that these principles are not the principles of hatred or selfishness or anything. They're simple, common sense, freaking core values that we all share. Everybody wants to be left alone. Everybody wants the rewards of their stuff. And everybody agrees that it's wrong to hurt somebody and to take their stuff. Pretty simple. So if you have these three simple things, just a couple of simple things, how do you actually sell this stuff? Well, I had a really remarkable epiphany about this just a few months ago. I was down in Florida, and I fly from LAX to Fort Lauderdale, and every single time I go Virgin America. I'll fly Virgin America towns I'm not even going to. That's how much I like Virgin America. So there's a point to this, so stay with me here. First time I flew on a Virgin America flight, I walked into that, it was a red-eye. I walked into that airplane at 11 o'clock at night at LAX, and I walked into a room that was dark, and the lighting on the airplane was purple and red. and the seats were white plastic and black leather, and the music they were playing was the kind of jazz that you only hear in the coolest clubs I'd ever been in. And I said, this isn't an airplane, this is a freaking nightclub. This kicks butt. I couldn't believe how cool it was. And about a year ago, a little over a year ago, Virgin America did something that I really seriously would like you all to go home and watch when you get a chance. About a year and a half ago, Virgin America, which used to have a very funny, extremely funny, animated safety video, spent, I think it must have been millions of dollars, to do a new airplane safety video. So if you get a chance, go home, look up on YouTube, go Virgin America safety video. It's been seen by 11 million people, and I probably put about 40,000 of those hits on myself. I get off a Virgin America flight having watched the safety video in my chair, gotten in my car at LAX, driven home, fed the cats, gotten my headsets on, gone to YouTube because I wanted to hear it again. That's how good it is. And it is that good because the music is that good, the dancers are that hot, the movement is so sexy, it's so interesting, it's so cool, couldn't get enough of it. And it was only after about the time I came back and saw it for about the 8th or 9th time, I realized, hang on, I just got off the plane, I'm sitting here watching this, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, I wanted to see it before I go to sleep. Why am I doing this? I'm doing it because it's so entertaining, it's so well done, that I am willing to spend 4.5 minutes to hear the most boring information on the face of the earth. Here's how you operate a seatbelt. Here's how you blow up your emergency vest. Here's how you don't tamper with the smoke detectors in the bathroom. Here's how you find the exit doors. It's not only the most boring information in the world, it's the most boring information in the world, and I've heard it 200 times and totally blanked it out on every flight I've ever been on, but I couldn't get enough of it. And I couldn't get enough of it because it was magnificently choreographed. It was beautifully danced. Each one of these little beats was unique. They had these robot dancers, they had these gorgeous girls, they had a tremendous kicking soundtrack. It was absolutely fantastic. And I realized, if this video can make me watch the most boring information in the world for the 20th time, after hearing it 300 times commercially and 11 million people on YouTube have watched this safety video, then this is important. It's important. And I'm going to show you why. We need to reimagine our values for young people. Not reinvent them, not change them, reimagine them. There's a great example that I can give you for this. When you talk to young Americans about George Washington, young millennials who've never been told anything about the history of George Washington, know anything about him other than he owned slaves, that's about all they know about George Washington. When you talk to young people about George Washington, ask them to describe George Washington, what would they say? Well, they'll say, if you ask them, say, well, he had a frilly shirt, and he had a tri-corner hat on, and a powdered wig, and he had kind of old stockings and a waistcoat, and he just looks like an old guy, and he's carrying a musket of some kind, some ancient old rifle. Yeah, that's pretty much, that's what George Washington looked like. But that's not what George Washington looked like to the people that knew George Washington. That's what George Washington looks like to us 250 years later. You're going to look a little stupid 250 years from now. You may not believe me, but take my word for it. That little hoodie is going to look pretty absurd somewhere around 100 years from now. 200 years from now, you're going to look like a caveman, and 250 years from now, people are going to laugh at you because of how you're dressed. So what I said to them was this. Not many people know this, but during the Revolutionary War, George Washington snuck a message through enemy lines. He sent a message to London, England, at who he's been at war with for 6-7 years now. And the message was very simple, and it was to a tailor in London. And George Washington sent a message, and the message, I got it almost memorized, it was very simple. He said, I would like to purchase 4 waistcoats in the latest designs using the most fashionable colors that are currently available. I would like the buttons to be as ornate as possible without looking ostentatious. What will that cost? And I'll send you a check. Why did he send that message to London while he's at war in the Revolutionary War? Why did he go to a London tailor? Well, because George Washington was probably the best dressed man on planet Earth. He very likely was the best dressed man on planet Earth, and he thought being president of a new republic of hicks and hayseeds meant it's especially important that I be the best dressed man on planet Earth. So I say to high school kids, if George Washington were standing next to me today, George Washington would not be wearing a tri-cornered hat, powdered wig, frilly collar, waistcoat, and stockings. If George Washington were standing next to me today, he was 6'4", but he was 6'4" when everybody was 3'4", just he'd be 6'6". He'd be wearing a $20,000 Armani suit. He'd have a $900 Hermes shirt. He'd have $2,000 shoes. He'd have an $800 haircut, and he'd be holding an AR-15 with a laser target designator because George Washington was a swinging, deadly dude. That's who George Washington was. George Washington here today would look like money because he was money. He understood the power of it. He understood the power of the image. That's who George Washington is. If he were standing here today, would he be dressed like that? He'd be dressed in a $20,000 suit. And I thought to myself, how do we get this idea across to young people? Because the people that knew George Washington wanted him to be king. They fought an entire war against kings. And the first thing they wanted to do was make him king because he was so overwhelmingly glamorous and interesting and sexy and cool. He was every single celebrity you know today rolled into one, and he was the founder of this nation. They wanted him to be king. They wanted to refer to him as Your Excellency. He said, no, you will call me Mr. President. We're all equals here. When people hear this, when young people hear this, they start to reimagine the entire thing. The whole thing becomes new again. George Washington in a $20,000 Armani suit with an $800 haircut is accessible to them in a way that an old guy in a powdered wig and a tri-corner hat isn't. And you can do this for all of it. So if I were going to tell the story of George Washington today, I'd do what they did in the Virgin Safety video. I'd have a guy standing there in the tri-corner hat with the wig and the waistcoat and everything. I'd have him standing there with a musket, and then I would have three of the hottest young women on earth, and they live in the town I live in. They're in Los Angeles. I see them every day. And they would walk up to this model, this 6'5" model, and they would grab this outfit and they'd just pull it off. It'd be a breakaway costume, and he'd be standing there, this tan buff, 6'5", 35-year-old super god wearing a pair of boxer underwear, and these women would circle around him and they'd start to put him into this Hermes suit. They'd put a $9,000 watch on his hand, and they'd do the cufflinks, and Washington would do the James Bond cufflink pull. You know how it is, you come out of action, so yeah, he'd do one of those. They'd put a little mousse in his hair, they'd mess him up, and they'd say, that's who the father of this country was and is and always will be. That's who he is. It's not who he was, that's who he is. And that's why they worshipped him. And when he said, no, I'm not going to be your king, that's why we love the guy. That's why we love the guy. That's the power of reimagining these things. And you can do this all the time. You can especially do it by using the language of the pop culture. And using the language is very, very important. I was at an event in Phoenix, and afterwards, during the Q&A period, this is when I really started to think about this messaging idea. During the Q&A period, a young woman, probably 16-year-old woman from the local high school said, hey, Bill, I have a question for you. Yeah, we want to start a tea party group at our high school. We wonder if you had any ideas. I said, I do have some ideas. My first idea is whatever you do not call it a tea party group. Under any circumstances, don't call it that. Forget about the fact that the tea party's been unfairly demonized. You talk to young people about a tea party and they see a bunch of little old women sitting around drinking tea. They don't know that the actual Boston Tea Party was a bunch of college kids who were drunk out of their minds, basically, and utterly incensed about the fact that somebody had put a charge on their Wi-Fi, basically, a 1-cent tax on tea. These guys got liquored up. They got charges for Wi-Fi. They went out there and trashed the king's boat and they threw the tea overboard. They can relate to that, but they can't relate to this idea of a tea party. Tea party is very delicate. It's something old people do. I said if I were you, I would print up a little brochure, and the brochure would say that at 4 o'clock on Tuesday in room 228, there will be the first meeting of the Rebel Alliance. And I could see from that young lady's look, I could see it, she just lit up. And she lit up because for the first time ever, an actual conservative was speaking to her in a language that she understood. I'm speaking the language of Star Wars, and that's not a trivial thing. How do we expect the American people to let us run the country if we don't even understand our own mythology? We don't deserve to run the country if we can't speak the language of the American people. My friend Jeremy Boring said something that was extremely provocative and made me very angry, but it's really true. He said on some level, Barack Obama is more American than Mitt Romney. I said, come on. He said, no, Barack Obama knows The Simpsons, Barack Obama knows Family Guy, Barack Obama has downloaded songs from iTunes, Barack Obama hangs out with Beyonce. This is the language that Americans speak today. And if we can't speak this language, not only are we not going to have a chance to rule this country, or govern the country, I should say, we don't deserve to. So, I said, start the first meeting of the Rebel Alliance. She said, well, what do I tell people if it just says the Rebel Alliance? I said, if somebody comes up to you and says, what is this Rebel Alliance thing? What you need to do is look right at them and say, this isn't for you. What do you mean it's not for me? No, this isn't for you. You're not cut out to be a member of the Rebel Alliance. You don't know that, maybe I am. What do you mean I'm not cut out to be a member of the Rebel Alliance? No, you have to understand, look, if you're going to be a member of the Rebel Alliance, you have to understand that on our best days, we're outnumbered 100 to 1. You don't have the social strength to be outnumbered the way we're outnumbered every day. On our best day, we're outnumbered 100 to 1. You have to be smart. You have to understand that things that look like they might be true, maybe not are, in fact, not true. As a matter of fact, it's only through a lifetime of study of these advanced Jedi skills that allows just a handful of us to get into these beat-up X-Wing starfighters, these pieces of junk, and get up there and fly through wave after wave of incoming TIE fighters, roll down into that Death Star trench, avoid the incoming laser blast, pickle off a couple of photon bombs, put it into a vent the size of a pie dish, and get the hell out of there before this Death Star blows up and takes all of this with it. You better hope that we're successful while you're sleeping, because if we are not, you are going to wake up one day and they're going to be roasting rats over burning tires in the streets. So if you think you can handle this Rebel Alliance thing, be prepared, because it ain't easy. And you say that to somebody and you watch what happens to that meeting of the so-called Tea Party and that little Phoenix event thing. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about freedom. We're talking about rebellion against authority. We're talking about what makes this country great. We're talking about, leave me alone, get out of my face, step off, don't tell me what to do. This is mine, I own it. That Millennium Falcon belongs to me. It doesn't belong to the Empire, it's mine. I paid for it, I built it, I risked my life for it. It's my ship. Leave me alone. I'm a good guy. I don't need to be told what to do. Get out of my way. And all of a sudden, man, they are right there. They're right there. Because you're speaking their language. So, look, when it comes time to messaging, one of the things that we can do with the progressives is we can just steal their language. They stole our language. They call themselves liberals. There's nothing liberal about today's liberals. Nothing liberal about them at all. I am, in fact, I don't mean to be getting into sophistry or split hairs with you, but I'm very clear on this. I am a conservative because I'm trying to conserve classical liberalism. That's what I'm trying to do. Classical liberalism, the liberalism of the founders, is the idea of private property, individual rights, coupled with individual responsibility, fighting an entire empire because they decided to put a 1-cent tax on tea because we don't like other people taking our money. We think we can spend our money better than the king can. All of these ideas about the American founding that we value as conservatives are fundamentally liberal ideas, and these so-called liberals, who are actually big state socialist collectivists, are simply another brand of elitists who believe that only the smart people should have the power and everybody else will do what they tell them to, for their own good, of course. For their own good, of course. This progressivism is not new. The idea of a small of elite people ruling everybody else and parceling out little garbage iPhones and garbage apartments and garbage transportation and garbage housing to keep them happy so that they keep them in power is ancient. It goes back to the Romans, predates the Romans. It's empires, it's pharaohs, it's shahs, it's emirs, it's all this other stuff. So only one original idea in all of human history, and that's the idea of limited government and large people, large individual people. So I don't call them liberals anymore because they're not. I just don't call them liberals. They're not. But I do steal some of their language. Why are you a conservative, they'll say to me. And I'll say to them, I'm a conservative because my commitment to diversity. You're Republicans? No, you're Republicans. What do you mean you're Republicans with diversity? No. How can you possibly be the party of diversity? We're the party of diversity. Just look at us. African Americans for Obama, Asians for Obama, gays for Obama, women for Obama, Loch Ness Monsters for Obama. We've got a little website and a place to donate. We're the party of diversity. And I say, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're the party of tribes. You're the party of interest groups. You're the party of one part of America set against another part of America. You're the party that says if you don't toe the line on abortion or global warming, not only are you out of the club, but we're not even going to be your friend anymore. When I say I'm in favor of diversity, I'm talking about the real diversity. Because there's only one kind of diversity when you get right down to it, ladies and gentlemen, because nobody in this room agrees on everything. When you get down to brass tacks, every single one of us is a political party of one. The diversity that I celebrate as a conservative is the diversity of the individual person. And that's what real diversity is, and that's what I like. I don't think that if a black person disagrees about spending, he's suddenly not really black anymore. If a woman is against abortion, she's not actually a woman anymore. I'm not the person who's telling you that your entire identity as a human being, forget about your political identity, is dependent on you agreeing with all the things that put me in power. I don't believe that at all. I believe that people should be able to disagree on everything. That's the great strength of this country, is the disagreement. It's not unity. Forget unity. It's about disagreement and argument. That's what makes this country strong. The ultimate diversity is the individual. I am an individualist. You are a collectivist. We can use words like liberal and conservative and Republican, Democrat till the cows come home, but let's get down to brass tacks. For example, if we're talking about abortion, let's not say pro-life or pro-choice, okay? These are advertising terms. These are terms that we use to wrap our idea in advertising so that if I'm pro-life, that means you must be pro-death. Or if I'm pro-choice, that must mean that you're pro-slavery. No. If we're going to talk about abortion, let's talk about abortion in a way that makes sense. Are you pro-abortion or anti-abortion? It's the procedure, so let's just speak honestly about what we're talking about and get rid of these advertising terms. So I don't say Republican, Democrat, conservative, or liberal. I say, are you an individualist or are you a collectivist? Which one of these two things are you? If you think that we all have an obligation to pay for each other's health care, that's a fair statement of collectivism. I believe we should be responsible for our own needs with assistance for limited periods of time when we can't help ourselves, but we have a responsibility to do for ourselves. That's my position. And when you get down to this sort of thing, we get into positions of real clarity. Real clarity. Because, I'll say, for example, I am 100% in favor of free health care being given to everyone. 100%. What kind of a jerk would I have to be to deny people free health care? What kind of a monster would I have to be to deny people free health care? I'd have to be a Republican conservative monster, I guess, right? To be mean enough to deny suffering people free health care? I'm 100% in favor of free health care to everybody. The problem is, health care isn't free. If it were free, I'd be in favor of giving it to everybody, but it's not free. It costs money. It costs a lot of money. Cardiac surgery is not free. When you're talking about 4 of the most experienced, highly educated people in the world surrounded by a team of specialists and enough equipment to buy an entire village anywhere else in the world, this is not only not free, this is very expensive. So since it's not free, why don't we talk about who's going to pay for it? And once we start talking about who's going to pay for it and how it's going to get paid for, we are no longer fighting on their grounds. Now we're fighting on our grounds. Now we're talking about what is the most efficient way, what is the best way, what is the most responsive way, what is the value of competition applied to healthcare, because we see what happens with competition applied to electronics, for example. And now, since we're not talking about free healthcare anymore because there's no such thing as free healthcare, now we're going to win the argument, because now the question isn't about whether it's free or not. The argument is about what's the best way to deliver it, but we don't get there until we say to them, if it were free, of course I'd be in favor of giving it to people. If you could print Cadillacs out of a factory, just print them out, and there was no cost for raw materials, labor, the energy, nothing, of course I'd be in favor of everybody having a Cadillac. Of course I would be. But they can't, so you can't. So let's talk about what we actually can do. And when you get people out of those trenches, you start to win arguments, because Cadillacs aren't free. Somebody's going to have to pay for them. And somebody's going to have to pay for the health care, which means that somebody's going to be taking money from some people and giving it to somebody else. And now we've got the core of the argument, and that argument we can win. Because we didn't just walk into their minefield and their machine gun us about, why are you guys against free health care? I'm in favor of free health care. I think free health care is fantastic. But there is no free health care. I'd like to be able to fly through the room too. That'd be lovely. And I'm in favor of anyone who can do it, do it. But if you can't, you have to deal with the fact that we have to walk sometimes. And now we're starting to win the argument, because we're getting down to the language. We're getting down to the brass tacks. And one final thing I think I'll say and get into before I close here, and that is this. The one thing you have to understand about the left today is that the left has one currency and one currency only. They don't have history, because the history of collectivism is the history of between 100 to 200 million people killed by their own big governments. People call us Nazis. They call us, the small government, the small government arm the people, those people. They call us Nazis. Nazi is a German acronym. It stands for National Sozialistische, NSDAP, National Socialistische Deutschland Arbeiterpartei. It basically means National Socialist German Workers' Party. That's what Nazi is an acronym for. You can't spell Nazi without National Socialist Workers' Party. They are a large state, gun-controlled, free healthcare for everybody, monolithic, single leader with the logos, big state solution that killed 12 million people at least, not including the war casualties. You have the Soviet Union, which wasn't called communist, was called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. They starved at least 10 million people to death and probably shot another 20 or 30 people. 20 or 30 million people, what's a few million, to bring us workers' paradise in the world. The Chinese communists starved 50 million people to death for their ideology. Throw in 7 or 10 million people killed by socialism in Cambodia, and another few million in South America, and all the people Castro's killed, and all the rest of them. You got between 100 and 200 million actual people who have died because of your philosophy of collectivism, and you don't get to say, well, no, that was a bad guy, they didn't do it right. How many 100 million people do we have to kill before you get it right? Maybe the problem isn't that they didn't do it right. Maybe the problem is if you believe that certain people should have absolute power over the collective, it's going to automatically bring the worst, most brutal, most violent murderous people to the top. How many people are we going to have to kill before we start to realize that maybe this isn't the best idea after all? Knock their unearned moral superiority out from underneath them. And the third rail of American politics, and I'm going there right now, is this race issue. This idea that we're racist, that Republicans and conservatives are racist. Let me tell you who the real racists are, okay? This entire population of black Americans has for 4 generations now been enslaved by the idea that you don't have to work, except we want you to work for 1 hour every 2 years. That's all we want. We're going to get crap food, crap housing, crap transportation, crap cell phones, and all we want out of you is 1 hour's work every 2 years to keep us in power. So, let's do a little history, because they don't like history. History is unfortunate for them. You want to talk about race in America? Let's go back to the basics. After the Civil War was over, which was launched by Republicans, the Republican Party was founded to eliminate slavery in America, and the Democratic candidate in both 1860 and 1864, especially in 1864, George McClellan said, why don't we just call it the Civil War a draw? Come back and keep the slaves, we'll just say it never happened. All of those protesters turning those hoses on those people in Selma, Alabama, the people who were the governors and the policemen sicking those dogs on those black protesters were Democrats. They were Democrats. All of them were Democrats. The Jim Crow laws were written by Democrats. All of this stuff was written by Democrats. But let's get down to brass tacks about race in America. At the turn of the 1900s, the turn of the previous century, there was a gigantic debate in the 30 or 40 years after the Civil War, an enormous debate about the future of black Americans in this country. And the debate was headed by 2 people. On one hand was W.E.B. Du Bois, I think it's pronounced Du Bois, it wants to look like Dubois. But anyway, W.E.B. Du Bois had a belief that we should take from white America, we should demand from them a series of concessions and a series of economic benefits, and that these economic benefits would be distributed by his term now, by the talented 10th, by the educated 10% of the black population that would distribute it to the rest of the black population. We would demand it through guilt and through threats and all these other things, and we, talented 10th, the 10th of us, the smart 10th, would give it to the rest of the black population. That was his position. On the other side was Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington said, no, we have to go back to the people that we used to work for as slaves, and we have to be farmers because we have to develop our own economy, we have to develop our own resources. We have to be farmers so that our sons can be mechanics, so that their sons can be doctors. We don't have a right to ask for or demand respect, we're going to earn respect. And Booker T. Washington at his Tuskegee Institute produced black students whose GPA was far higher than white students in America, far higher, and had a lower out-of-birth rate out-of-wedlock birth rate. They had a much lower out-of-wedlock birth rate. Their test scores were higher, and when the Tuskegee Airmen entered World War II, they were given third-rate training, second-rate equipment. They're the best fighter pilots of the war. They never lost a bomber because Booker T. Washington realized that the way to eliminate racism and prejudice is not through demands, it's through excellence. It's through the unassailable excellence of their performance. That was the America that we could have had. That was the America that we should have had. It's the America we deserve to have. It was the America that one of the greatest Americans who ever lived, Booker T. Washington, who said to Black America, if we become victims, we are going to stay victims. We must prove that we are not only the equals of these people, we are their betters. We will enter the society as equals. And America made a choice, and we have this choice in front of us today. So I don't want to hear anything about how Republicans are racist. We are the people that believe that Black Americans should have the right to live the same right as any other individual in this country. The right to determine your own destiny. The right to be a person who determines the course of his own life through his own actions, his or her own ability to work or not work, and not just sit there for the rest of your life and wait for the government to send you a check so that you can just be a piece of wood that floats down a river. That's the choice that was made in this country. That's the choice we're facing today. I will not hear it. I will not hear it. That is the racism. It's the racism of the left that looks at Black Americans as a voting plantation. I won't hear it. I know my history. I know what Booker T. Washington was saying, and I saw it work. I saw his test scores, I saw his his out-of-wedlock rates, and I saw his fighter pilots in World War II. I won't hear it. And if you take away their unearned moral superiority, all they have left is the evidence of their policies, and that evidence is murder and failure. Period. End of discussion. It's over. So, let me close with this. We have to get in this fight. We have to make movies. We have to give people something they can connect to. Young people have to see pictures and movies where the good guy has our values. It's not about our values. It's just a good guy who has our values. It's got to be galling for the left that a big leftist like Matt Damon, who's a big gun control guy, makes his living by running around shooting guns at people. It's got to be a little annoying for them, I would imagine. Matt Damon is the kind of a leftist who says things like this. I'm a movie star. I'm very rich. I think we should raise taxes on the American people. I'm going to get hit worse of anybody. Wow, Matt, you are an incredibly advanced, spiritually advanced, magnificent, noble man. However, unfortunately, Matt, I work in show business as well. So let me just point out a few things. First of all, if you go home with a $7 million paycheck instead of a $9 million paycheck for 6 weeks' worth, that's the kind of sacrifice I can find a way to live with. That's number one. Number two, I know, and you know, they don't know, but we know, that when MGM makes a movie starring Matt Damon, they don't write a check that says, paid to the order of Matt Damon, $9 million. They write a check that says, paid to the order of MD Productions, $9 million, and that every single part of your life is owned by your production company. You don't pay a dime of tax on any of that stuff. Your production company writes you a check that's enough for you to be able to buy a pack of gum at the airport, and you get paid the absolute minimum amount of money that you can get because all the rest of it is tax-free. And at the end of the day, you and the rest of you limousine liberals up in the hills of Hollywood do the same thing that these knuckle-dragging conservatives out in Dubuque, Iowa do, which is tell their tax attorneys, what is the least I can pay and not break the law? You don't get to stand here, Matt, and tell me you're a better person than me by being the kind of hypocrite that does everything that we do and still wants to wear this badge of magnificence. I'm the person who will suffer the most. Raise taxes on everybody. Project Head Start is being underfunded. Raise taxes on everybody. You know what, Matt? If you really like Project Head Start, why don't you write them a check for $9 million? Why don't you write them a check? They'll take the money. Why don't you write them a check? Why are you making a gun put to the head of everybody else out in this audience and everybody else out in the country, making them pay for it? Why don't you just write a check? These people, if you raise their taxes on them, they're not going to have a college education fund, or they're not going to take that vacation, or they're not going to get to build that extension to their house. They don't get to go home with $7 million instead of $9 million. I don't buy it, man. I don't buy it. I'm one of you. I know what kind of people you are. I am a daywalker, man. I'm a vampire that walks in the daylight, and my job is to slay other vampires because I know how the system works. You do not get this unearned moral superiority. You do not get the unearned moral superiority of saying free Tibet by having a free Tibet bumper sticker on your Prius. You know why? Because if you have a bumper sticker that says Free Tibet on your Prius, that doesn't free Tibet. It doesn't do the slightest thing to free Tibet. If you really want to free Tibet, and I do, then maybe you ought to take off that Free Tibet bumper sticker and put on one that says United States Marine Corps. Because if you really want to free Tibet, that's how it's going to be done. So you pull away this unearned moral superiority, this posturing, they've got nothing left. Here's the bad news and the good news, ladies and gentlemen. I know we've been through a rough 5 years, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. I want to use the pop culture to be special forces. People like you have to hold the line and win elections. You have to stay out there, you have to do the ground game, you have to win elections, you have to get out the vote, all that stuff. That's trench warfare. That's holding the line. I am tired of losing territory to these people. I'm sick of it. I'm done. I don't want to hold the line. I want to get some ground back. I want a special forces of cultural warriors that blow up an ammo dump 40 miles in the rear where they are absolutely sure they have everything iced. But when they turn around and look at it and go, what the hell's that? And converge on that target, now all of a sudden a bridge disappears and goes into the river on the other side of the map. I want to be back there messing up their headquarters. I want to be sabotaging everything they believe. I want to make conservatism cool and sexy because it is cool and sexy. We believe in loud guns and fast cars and hot women, and we believe that everyone should have 5 houses if you work hard enough. And we have 6 flags on the moon. And if you want to do something, you should be able to do it so long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. That's what I believe. What do they believe? What's their vision for America's future? A bunch of people sitting around thatched huts in carbon-neutral construction, walking around each other, pulling parasites off of each other around a burning cow pie, eating their sustainable algae cakes, raising money for the Guatemalan water snake. Are you actually trying to tell me that these are equal visions that we can sell to America? Please stop. I've had enough. I'm done. So, the cultural board in this country is so heavily tilted, it's tilted so heavily, the cultural landscape, the mass media landscape is tilted so heavily in this country, the thing that we don't understand is it's tilted in our favor. It's not tilted in their favor. They have to control everything. They have to own all of the movies and academia and colleges and comedy. They have to own all of it to get a 50-50 election nationally. This country is so conservative they have no idea. They have to paper up the windows and make sure not a single ray of light or disappearing or disapproving opinion comes in, because if the truth comes into a dark room, it's not dark anymore. You cannot project darkness into a room. You can only keep the light out. That's our great advantage. That is our tremendous advantage, is the power of truth. But there is bad news in here, and this is what you need to go home with tonight. You need to understand the bad news about our position, and I can explain our position to you very succinctly. The bad news about the fight between individualism and collectivism is this. The bad news is they can beat us, but we can never beat them. Ever. Ever. We can never beat them. Ever. Ever. And the reason that we can never beat them is because rust never sleeps. Rust never sleeps. If you want a nicely manicured yard with roses and a beautiful lawn, you don't get to go out and mow the lawn and say, well, I've mowed the lawn. Problem solved. The second you put that lawnmower away, that grass is growing again. The second you come inside with your pruning shears, those weeds are starting to spread. We can never defeat them because they are on the side of entropy. They are on the side of easiness. They're on the side of dependency as opposed to responsibility. They're on the side of telling people, don't worry, relax, we got this covered. We're on the side of saying, no, it takes a lot of work to be the master of your own destiny, and you're going to have to get up and do that work. Entropy is on their side. We can never beat them. They can only beat us. We have to wake up every day and roll that rock up the hill, and our reward for rolling the boulder up the hill is we go to bed at night and we wake up in the morning and the boulder is at the bottom of the hill again. If you don't understand it, it's time to get out of this game. If you don't understand that we can never beat these people, all we can do is fight them, then you're going to get really discouraged. And I know many of you are. I know many of you just don't know the point of it. You just don't know, why am I going to go out and do this again? Why am I going to go do this? Why? We wake up every day and we just get more and more outnumbered. Why am I going to do it? Why? Well, you do it because it's our job, right? You do it because you want the rock on the top of the hill, you want the boulder on the top of the hill, not on the bottom. You do it because you'd rather live in a manicured rose garden than in a bunch of weeds. Period. That requires constant, perpetual, ongoing work. We don't have to tell that to the men and women who are not in this room tonight because they're sleeping in cold and dangerous and deadly places so that we can have these discussions without fear of being mortared or shot by snipers. They understand this very well. They understand that that sacrifice and that commitment has to be made every single day, and we need to understand it too. But the beautiful thing that's nice end of this thing is this. If you understand that that rock has to be rolled up every day, if you understand that rust never sleeps, if you understand that you're never, ever done mowing the lawn, not ever, then it will become clear to you eventually that your job is not to make sure that the lawn is mowed forever, that your job is not to make sure that the rock stays up on the top of the hill forever. Your job is not to save the country for 100 years. Your job is not to save the country for 10 years. Your job is not to save the country for the next 5 years. Your job is just to save the country today. It's just that simple, really. It's just to save it today. It's all you have to do. Just today. And tomorrow when you wake up, it's going to be worse. Tomorrow when you wake up, it's going to be more depressing. Tomorrow when you go to Drudge or Fox News or Faux News or any of these other hate-filled sites that we all frequent to get the actual truth, it's going to be worse. And it's going to be more depressing. And you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to have to make the same decision that the strange little fat man made in 1940. Winston Churchill sat in the back benches of Parliament for 10 years, saying to his countrymen, this guy's not joking to Adolf Hitler. He's not joking. He is going to kill all the Jews. He is going to conquer the world. He's not joking. He's building an air force and a navy and an army, and we are getting weaker every single second, and they are getting stronger every single second. He said it for 10 years. And they called him a warmonger, and they called him a racist, and they called him an idiot, and they called him delusional, all these other things. And finally, when he was called in by King George to be Prime Minister, who was not the first choice, by the way, Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of Great Britain within 48 hours of France surrendering to the Germans. He knew he was going to have to fight Adolf Hitler, but he thought he was going to do it with the French, who had the largest army in Europe. He thought, when he said we have to fight these Nazis, that he would do it with the French, and that the Germans would be on the border of Belgium 200 miles away. When he took office, there was nothing but wreckage at Dunkirk. Nothing but burned out tanks at Dunkirk. And the Germans weren't 200 miles away, they were 20 miles away. He could see the airfields that German bombers were going to be coming from. The Germans were a 9-minute flight across the channel away from the South Wing. They were 9 minutes away. And Winston Churchill was advised by every single member of his government. They said, Hitler likes Britain, he admires us, he thinks we're Aryans. We'll get the best possible deal. He doesn't want to subjugate us. He's promised some future for the British Empire. All he wants is the continent. He just wants the continent. We can keep our empire for a while anyway. And Winston Churchill heard this, and all of his advisors said, make the best deal you can, and a man without an army, and with just barely an air force, and with nothing but his belief, said no. I don't know if I can ever get through this. I tell this story 100 times. I can't get through it without choking up. Winston Churchill said on the floor of Parliament, he said, if our Long Island story is going to come to an end, let it end with all of us dying on the floor of this building, drowning in our own blood. And that's why we're speaking English today. We're speaking English today because a strange little man with some very strange ideas made a daily decision that he was going to fight these people. And we look back through the telescope of history, well, of course, it was inevitable. Nonsense. I'll tell you something. I read a lot about Winston Churchill. He never, ever even intimated this in public, but I'm convinced he must have woken up every day for that first year for 1940, convinced they were going to lose. Sure they were going to lose. He just wanted to lose with honor. He wanted to lose and make that story mean something. And because he didn't lose, because he decided to get up every single day and fight just that day, they didn't lose. They won. Hooray. It's a decision. It's just a choice, just like everything else. Of course they want you to believe you're the last people in the world who think these things. Of course they want you to believe that faux news is not really news. Of course they want you to believe that your ideas are old and dinosaurs and that young people hate everything about it. Of course they want you to believe this. They want you to give up. They don't have to work. We have to work. If we give up, they win. If they give up, we still have to mow the grass. Don't give up. That's right. going to do some Q&A, and I have to tell you, I've got to be out of the building in about 10 minutes to 9 to make my flight back to Mordor, where I live, where the giant red eye looks down over the screen. So if we have any questions, I'd love to take them, but thank you again so much. Joel's got it? Joel's got it handled? We have a mic? Oh, there we are. Oh, okay, so questions are over there where Joel is. That's where, are people going to come over there, Joel?
No, what's going to happen is our ushers are going to hand out index cards. They'll walk the aisles down.
Oh my gosh, we had index cards. Well, this is a sophisticated organization. I'll try and get through these as fast as I can because I just love the Q&A. It's my favorite part.
And while we're waiting for your questions to start trickling in, I just want to thank you very much for your appearance on the Rebel Alliance of Silicon Valley. Am I audible?
Yes, barely.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. We've got our best person on the job, and then
All right,
it's going to have to go.
Folks can adjust it there.
This is one advantage of taking questions on index cards from conservatives is we know how to write.
So, following up on one of the topics towards the end of your talk, relating to taking our enemies seriously, Churchill's arguments about Nazis, seems like that applies to Islamists today. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and you know, when you have thoughts on a subject like this, it's important to put the most important thing first. So I will put the most important thing first. The huge majority of the Muslims in America are peaceful, good Americans who contribute a great deal to this country. I've been in any number of attacks, I've been in any number of situations, met them lovely, wonderful, seriously hard-working American citizens who have as much a right to be here as anyone else, and if you think that's just platitudes, you're wrong. If you don't start from this position, you will fall into serious error, and we don't want to do that. So this isn't a that, but, this is a that, and. There is, in fact, a state of war that has been going on with the United States of America since 1979. In 1979, the Islamic Republic of Iran was formulated with the overthrow of the Shah and the advancement of Ayatollah Khomeini, and with the advancement of Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia. You had both parts of the Islamic world, the Shiites and the Sunnis, united in a cause of war against everything that the West stands for. So, you have to understand, if you don't understand this at all, the United States has been at war with these elements of Islam since 1979. We're not at war with them, but they're at war with us. They're very clear about this. Just as a small percentage of the German population were actual, honest-to-God Nazis, and a much, much smaller actual SS personnel, we have to understand the power of an evil philosophy run amok. The reason that Germany was able to become so awful and to allow this to happen was not because these people started out evil, it's because the atmosphere of evil, intolerance, and brutality gave room for the most base instincts in human nature to arise. And we're seeing the same thing with this Islamic movement, with this jihadi movement. So in the same way that many millions and millions and millions of Germans had no knowledge of the death camps, would have done, were absolutely clueless of it, at the same time they knew something was wrong. And they didn't say anything. And that led to serious problems. So if you want to compare Islamicists with Nazis, I would say something that may resonate with many people in this country. It's my position on it. I wasn't kidding when I said about honest, hard-working, decent Islamic Americans. The left will never identify a terrorist attack as a Muslim attack because the left believes that if we heard the word it was a Muslim attack, then we'd all just rise up and murder every Muslim we can find. That's projection. We're not that stupid. We know who launched this attack. We know the last words that were ever spoken on every one of those planes that hit those buildings. When those planes hit the Pentagon and hit the two towers, we know for an absolute moral certainty what the last two words issued in those airplanes were. We don't have to say them. We know what the last two words shouted at the top of their lungs were. We're not idiots. And we didn't murder all the Muslims in America. So let's deal with the issue. If you remain silent as a Muslim American or as a civilized Muslim anywhere in the world in the face of this barbarism, you are not only complicit in it, but you are bringing upon your head the same exact doom that befell the Nazis, and for the exact same reason. And there is, in fact, an extremely interesting counterpoint that really makes this case. Because after the beginning of World War II for America, on December 8th, of 1941. America was attacked by the Empire of Japan, and many Americans were filled with a burning rage towards Japanese Americans. They were interred by a Democratic president for no reason whatsoever, but the point I'm trying to make is this. Japanese Americans, in the days and weeks and months after World War II, enlisted in record numbers for the military. They had to be sent to Europe because they deployed these Japanese Americans to the Pacific. They were worried that our own soldiers, who were so righteously and correctly enraged at the filthy tactics of the Empire of Japan, would take it out on their own citizens. But these Japanese units were deployed to Europe, and they fought with bravery and distinction, the likes of which we've never seen in this country, because they had something to prove. They had something to prove. What they had to prove is that they were Americans first. They were Americans who came from Japan. I don't see anything like this among American Muslims today. I don't see anything like it. And that makes me angry. And it's not only makes me angry, it makes me worried. It's telling me you're not earning your place here. When America was attacked by Japan, Japanese Americans enlisted under the flag of America and fought the enemies of America with remarkable heroism and distinction. I don't see anything like that at all in Muslim America today. And the thing that concerns me about that is this. By them remaining silent, not only are they bringing this judgment down on their own heads, which they do not deserve through their actions, but they do deserve through their silence, they are allowing these virulent, barbarian, savage animals to think that they're going to get away with it. And the end result of this will be the end result of what always happens when people start messing around with free people. They think we're fat, lazy, stupid cowards. And we will continue to be passive, and we will continue to take it until we won't take it anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has not seen America angry, truly angry, since 1945. This country's not been truly angry since 1945. And these American Muslims who are remaining silent because they're as terrorized by their own jihadi movements as the average German was terrorized by the Gestapo. I understand this, I do. I don't really blame them for it. I understand the power of fear over people's minds. I've studied communism, same thing with them. But if American Muslims remain silent because of the fear that they have towards these jihadi animals, then they are going to bring upon themselves the same fate that befell the Germans who were silent in the face of these Nazi atrocities. It's time to stand up for this country and show us what you really believe. It's time for all of us to stand up for this country. When these cartoons were first published back, it was 2003 or 4 when these things first happened. And the New York Times decided not to run them. And the LA Times decided not to run them. Oh, we don't want to cause any agitation. Well, we don't want to do any of this. No, we don't want to endanger our staff. And they're saying our core belief, our fundamental belief, the First Amendment, the right to free speech is more important than hurting these people's feelings. They're sending a signal to these people that we are in fact cowards. Well, guess what? We're not all cowards, just the editors of large newspapers are cowards. Not all of us. And they've had a chance to discover that in the sands of Iraq and Afghanistan. They thought they were going to get a bunch of hot tub lovers sipping Chardonnay, and they got some mean, deadly sons of guns who came over there and kicked some butt. So, I'm saying for the sake of everybody, let's start speaking some truth here. We understand that this is a small percentage of this religion, but we also understand that they are operating with impunity among the large number of peaceful Muslims, and if you don't stand up and say something, you are going to entail the same outcome, and you are going to deserve the same outcome as the citizens of Germany who didn't say anything when they had a chance to speak up against this kind of murder and terrorism and tyranny. And until they stand up and say it, we're going to be in real trouble. And the reason they're not, by the way, I'm telling you this, the reason they're not is because they're afraid. And you know why they're afraid? They're afraid because they don't think that there's anybody in the United States who's got their back. They don't see Americans as believing in their own culture. If I had seen that guy decapitate that man on that video, my response as President of the United States would be to put 10 megatons of the bright white light of freedom right over that spot. This kind of fear, the kind of fear engendered by Islamist radicals or by Nazis or by communists, that kind of fear only operates in the vacuum that is caused by the lack of courage of decent people to defend the weak. So defend it! Make them believe it! Don't just say, well, we're going to send you a sternly worded letter from the United Nations. Find every one of these animals and murderers, track them down and kill them. Kill them. And kill their bases and kill their armor and kill their armies in the field. Because if you say to them that we're not willing to stand up for the innocent people that you've murdered, then be willing to stand up for ourselves.
Right.
Why? And it's not just Paris. What was this? The latest outrage in Africa? They murdered 2,000 people. Muslims murdered 2,000 other Muslims, and what did we do? We did nothing. So as long as we keep doing nothing, we're going to get what happens when free people do nothing. And I saw this happen not very long ago in history books. My mom saw it with her own eyes. She saw Winston Churchill in bombed out London. She's a British subject. She saw it with her own eyes. I don't want to see it. I would rather stop them now than stop them later. But until these guys realize that we're serious, they're going to do more and more and more and more, and then they're going to get the outcome that none of us want. Then they're going to make America really angry. And I heard a stand-up comedian say this once. I don't jest about this kind of thing. I thought this guy was dead on. He said, you really don't want to make America genuinely angry. Because if you make America really angry, you'll know they're really angry, because instead of dropping 10,000 bombs on us, they'll drop 2. Then you'll know that they're really angry. It's funny, but it's not. It's funny, but it's not. So that's what I would say about that. Yes, sir. Thank you.
This year is the 50th anniversary of Johnson's Great Society, the welfare state. How would you translate this disaster during the 2016 election campaign? How do you make it cool to wean half the population from basic support?
I have an enormous respect for Mitt Romney as an individual. I think he's one of the best characters in terms of his personal character. He's one of the best men ever lived. But if Mitt Romney can say to the American people that we're going to lose 47% of the country because they're on benefits, then Mitt, with all due respect, you not only are not going to be president, but you don't deserve to be president. If you don't have a plan to win every single vote in this country, you probably don't deserve to be president. You certainly shouldn't be in this game. If you're going to run for president of the United States, you better have a sellable plan to win every single vote in this country. It doesn't mean you're going to get every vote, but you better have a plan for every single vote, because if you're ready to say half of America's off the table, you don't deserve to be president of the United States. You're the president of all of the United States. So the way I'd answer this question is this way. If it were me dealing with your issue, and I'd been Mitt Romney and I was running in 2012, I wouldn't have campaigned in the western coal fields of Pennsylvania where we had a chance to flip Pennsylvania. I would have gone to South Philadelphia, and I would have gone to the bluest blue district I could find. I would have gone to an all-black African American church in South Philadelphia. I would have. And I would have had C-SPAN there. And I would have simply gotten up on stage, and first thing I would have done is I would have endured the hatred and the jeers and the outrage and the anger. I would have just stood up and I would have taken it. Because if you're not ready to take it, this job is not for you. That's the first thing I would have done. And then I would have done this. I would have said, listen, let me tell you, good people, while I'm here today. First of all, I'm here as a matter of personal self-respect. A large number of lies have been told about me, and it offends me personally that I'm lying to you. I may not win your vote, but if I'm not going to get your vote, I'd at least not like to get your vote for the things I actually believe in, rather than the things you've been told I believe. So it's just a matter of personal self-respect I'm here. That's the first reason I'm here. But the second reason I'm here is this. I'm not running for president of half the country. I'm running for president of all the country. And if I didn't believe that my policies were better for every single American, then I'd change my policies. I believe my policies are better for every single American. And then I would have looked out into the audience and I would have tried to find the angriest face I could have found. And I would have said, sir, would you mind, just as it's not a trick or a joke, or just out of genuine curiosity, would you mind telling me your name? My name's Mitt Romney and I come from Utah. And hopefully he'd tell me his name. And I'd say, well, I'm a Republican because I think it's in my interest, in my self-interest to be a Republican, and I imagine you vote Democrat because you think it's in your self-interest to vote Democrat. Would you agree? Probably you would agree. Well, we have that in common, right? We have that in common. We have in common the fact that I vote a certain way because I think it's in my interest, you vote a certain way because you think it's in your interest. But let me just ask you this, not as a politician, not as a voter, not as anything, just man to man. Do you think that you are living the best life that you could be living right now? Is this the best life you can imagine for yourself right now, the life you live right now? Is this the best life you can imagine for yourself? I can't imagine that you would say yes to that, but if you do, I can tell you it's not the best life that I can imagine for you. You perceive it to be in your best interest to vote for Democrats because you get housing, and you get EBT cards, and you get Obama phones, and you get transportation, but we all know that the food is crap. We all know that the housing is crap. And we all know that the phone is crap. And we all know that all this stuff is crap. They give you just enough to get you to work for them 1 hour every 2 years. Never more than you need, just barely enough. So, you may perceive it's in your best interest to vote Democrat because you get a free phone, but it's a crap phone. I'm here to tell you, if you give us a chance, you will have so many economic opportunities to provide for yourself and your family that when the iPhone 7 comes out, you will be the first person in line to get the best phone on the planet because you will have earned the money in order to do that, if that is in fact your priority, if it's important to you. If it's not, then you'll have the ability to do something else. It's harder. It's not easier, it's harder. But it's a better life, and it's a better life for you, and we both know this is true. We both know that so much of this anger is coming from, not from a sense of even focused hatred, it's this unfocused rage. And that rage is generated by the fact that you know and I know that you're not master of your own destiny while I am. But there's nothing special about me. It's not because I'm white. It's not because of my birth. I had a small inheritance. I gave it away. The difference between us is I believe I'm the master of my own destiny and you don't. And you don't believe you're the master of your own destiny because it's been in other people's interests for 50 years to tell you that you're powerless and hopeless and a victim of forces much larger than your control. But I'm here to tell you it's not true. I'm here to tell you it's not true. I'm here to tell you that if you give us an opportunity, one opportunity, to create the economic opportunities that we believe we can create, you will be able to be the master of your own life. And if that means that the goal in your life is to sit around and do nothing, you have a right to do that. But if you want more, we'll show you how you can do it. We're not going to do it for you. Our main job is to get out of your way. Because we believe that every single one of you has a dream that has somehow been buried by the absolute certainty that it's never going to happen. And we both know it's not going to happen. Not the way things are going now. We are going to get out of your way and provide an opportunity for those of you to work as hard as you want to, for as long as you want to, but if you decide to pick up that little golden nugget, it will put you back in charge of your own destiny and you will be a fully human man, just like the rest of us. Every single one of us feels the same way. If I was in your situation, I'd vote exactly the way you do too. But there's a better life for you out there. There is. And I know it's true. And you know it's true. Anyway, my name's Mitt Romney. I'd like to have your vote, and if I don't get it, I understand. I do. But I wanted to tell you at least that I respect all of you enough to come here in person and endure the rage and endure the hatred and endure all the jeers because I want to be president of the people of the United States of America. And I can't do my job if I don't hear what you're angry about. How can I do my job if I don't know what you're so enraged about? How can we solve these problems together if I don't even know what they are? If Mitt Romney had given that little speech one time, that giant who cares about you most would have been another category he would have won, and we would have won that election with 80% of the vote.
Who are you going to work for?
How do the media convince us that a moderate Republican, by which we really mean liberal Republican, is the only one who can win?
I guess the same way that a hen house guarded by wolves convinces the farmer that wolves are the perfect guard for a hen house. I mean, they look, we have evidence, you know. I mean, this is an important part of our philosophy. Our philosophy is very simple, really. We try to discover what's objectively true, and we try to move to where the truth is. We don't try to drag the truth kicking and screaming to a pre-dug trench that we're in. We want to know where the truth lives. The truth's not going to move for me. The truth doesn't move for anybody. It's the truth. The truth doesn't care about what I think. I can have a theory about the acceleration rate of gravity when I drop a ball, but the acceleration rate of gravity is the same throughout the entire planet. I'm either on the truth or the truth is somewhere other than where I am. I want to be on the truth. So, in answer to your question, we have some evidence about this. For example, in 1980, we had a guy who ran for office on a platform of conservatism. And miserably, he only won 45 states. He only won 45 states in that election of 1980. But after 4 years of track record, after 4 years of evidence of these policies, he he ran again, and that time he only won 49 states. And he came 5,000 votes short of winning every state because he believed in these values, he knew how to explain these values, he loved these values, and he wasn't a nasty man. He was a happy warrior. He disagreed with people. You couldn't hate Ronald Reagan if you knew, because he seemed like such a nice guy. And he had a fundamental humanity about him that made these policies palpable. But if I'm talking to conservatives, I say, conservative pundits, well, we had a conservative run in 1980. He won 45 states. He ran after a 4-year track record in 84. He won 49 states. That's 49 out of 57 states, Mr. Obama. That's impressive. And then, if you want to say those days are over, they did a survey not long ago. They asked the American people, who would you vote for, Ronald Reagan or Barack Obama? They asked that question last year. Ronald Reagan beat him by 2-1. In 2010, we were told, no, do not fight an ideological battle. Obama's at the height of his powers. We can't possibly beat him. We came out, the Tea Party was invented, came out against Obamacare. Enormous Republican victory in 2010. 2012, no, you can't attack Barack Obama personally. You have to just attack his policies. Remember I told you about the villain earlier? About the villain in Star Wars? What that's really like is saying this. It's like Obi-Wan says to Luke, he says, Luke, tell me about this Darth Vader. Tell me about this Darth Vader character. And Luke says, well, Darth's not a bad man, Luke. It's just that his policies are not good for the Empire. He wants a 12% tax, and we think the Empire tax should be 7%. Otherwise, Darth Vader's a fine villain. And now you're going to get in one of these starfighters and risk your life to destroy a guy who's not a bad guy after all? No. No. Barack Obama is destructive to this country. His entire political system, his belief system is antithetical to what makes this country work. So attack him for it. Don't lie, but hit back. Then you've got two villains, right? Then it's which villain makes more sense to me. People will not vote for Darth Vader. Under any circumstances, they won't. So let's have two Darth Vaders and see which one we like best. But the evidence is there, and in 2014 we ran an ideological conservative election and we won gigantic. So, you're telling me that this doesn't make any sense because we're going to lose the soccer moms, and let's just say that you're right. If you're saying that we're conservatives and we have to walk to moderates, the definition of a moderate is somebody who hasn't made up their mind. Maybe we ought to start thinking about why they haven't made up their mind. Instead of walking to them, why don't we start making a case going to bring them to us? Why don't we just eliminate moderates as a political force in America completely by turning them into conservatives, by making what's an obvious case for everybody's benefit? If we did that, we wouldn't be having these discussions anymore. I got time for one more, and then I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to go like Barack Obama at tea time. I'm going to have to be out the door like a rocket. So I'm sorry if I didn't get a chance to talk and mix afterwards, but I'll be back next year. We do one more.
How often do you speak to college audiences, and do you have any evidence that you've been successful in converting the attendees to your way of thinking?
I haven't spoken as much as I would like. I do have some evidence that I'm converting attendees. I have evidence because I can see people are thinking, and you can see the smoke coming out of their ears. And it's not, look, all I do is I'm just barely young enough, and I'm 55. I'm just barely young enough to have shared the pop culture. I was a space age kid, I was an Apollo kid, nobody today connects with that. But I'm in show business, I watch a lot of TV. Simpsons have been on for 25 years. The last 10 or 15 years, certainly the last 15 years of The Simpsons has been like watching a cancer patient die. It's just not funny, it hasn't been forever, but it used to be. And I can do Simpsons impressions, and I know what Family Guy is, and I know what Game of Thrones is, and I know what Hunger Games is, and I know what these things are. I speak the language of these people. I understand it. So when a young person hears somebody who can talk about Star Wars, who can talk about these things in a language that they understand, they are able to hear the ideas behind them for the first time ever. So I'd love to tell you that all these people come and sign up, but I will tell you one thing. In the times I've had to have one-on-one conversations where I have actual feedback, it is astonishing, it's absolutely astonishing how easy it is to flip these people. Tammy Bruce pointed that out to me once. She was a current lesbian and former head of the National Organization for Women who became a conservative radio talk show host because she saw the light and started asking questions. And we were at an event once, and not together, but in the same room. And she asked me once, she said, have you ever realized how easy it is? 20 minutes of talking to these people, they're solidly converted. I said, yeah. Just because they don't know what they believe, because their ideas don't stand up to scrutiny. They believe what they believe for the same reason that the empire has no clothes, right? Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees. Oh, well, if you don't see the magnificent blue vest, then that's only the stupid and venal people don't see the magnificence of the embroidery on this waistcoat that the emperor's wearing right now. Oh, well, obviously, it's magnificent. All it takes is one little boy to say he's not wearing any clothes, he's naked, and the whole thing falls down. It's just that simple, right? It's like, oh, now I have to start thinking about things. And it's just that easy to convince these people. It's really just that easy. And it's time for me to go to the airport, but I'll tell you this last thing about that question. When I went to the University of Toronto and to Oberlin back-to-back a couple years ago, I thought that my mission there was to present conservative values in an understandable way, in an enthusiastic, passionate, understandable way, using language that people could connect to, as I tried to do tonight. But after I got there, I realized, no, I was wrong about that. That was a mistake. Because I got interviewed by a reporter from the Toronto Sun before I even did the Toronto show, and Oberlin was after that. We met at a cafe downtown. And she said to me after the interview was over, she said, I'd never met a conservative before. And I said, yeah, I'm not surprised. But what she meant by that was, you seem so nice. And she's right. I had a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, tell me, you know, when I hear you really speak, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but you kind of sound like a liberal. And it's like, well, I sound like a liberal because I genuinely do care about these things. I just want to do it right. I don't want to do what feels good. I want to do what does good. And I've given this a great deal of thought. Sometimes the things that feel the most good do the most harm, and the things that feel the worst do the most good. That's what tough love is, right? But what I realized was that when I went to these college campuses, and that my job was not to convey conservative principles. My primary mission was to convince these kids that I was an actual human being with real feelings, and that I cared just as much as they did about everything else. And furthermore, the solutions that I had in mind did actual real good, and theirs didn't. So who's the real compassionate person here? If you feel good about something that does harm, and I do something that does good that may not be particularly attractive politically, who's doing the real good here? Who's the real person? Who's got the real virtue? Once you start talking to people in this language, they think, well, maybe there's something to this after all. And then they start listening to the arguments, they pick up a Mark Levin book, and it's game over right after that. So that's why I could flip the whole country. I could flip the whole country. I could flip 97% of the country. There are 3% of them out there that are the true believers that understand that these ideas destroy freedom, destroy prosperity. That's what they want. They want to rule over the ruins. Those people we cannot flip, but the rest of them we could. And we just have to do it by being honest and by being emotional, connecting to the emotional argument. We have Obamacare as a national law today, not because of the benefits of Obamacare. We later found out, just a few weeks or months ago, that the entire purpose of the stack of documents that literally go from the top of this proscenium to the bottom of the stage was to make it so obtuse that no one could understand it. That was the mission of that legislation, make it unintelligible. So why do we have Obamacare today? It's not because of the brilliant argument they were making. We have Obamacare today because Barack Obama would stand on the floor of the House of Representatives, clouded in the glory of America. He's surrounded by the podium, the flags, the dome, everything. All of America, power and prestige, is focused on this one individual standing there. And he didn't say, do you know if we have socialized health care, this, 14% reduction, blah, 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 9% this, or so, 8% coverage. No, he said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Miss Bernice Johnson. Bernice, would you stand up for a minute, please? And the little old lady in the balcony stands up and waves kind of shyly. And he says, Bernice had a pre-existing condition. Bernice was burned through her entire life savings and the life savings of her husband, a former veteran who's not with us anymore, sadly. And Bernice's pre-existing condition bankrupted her and rank up her entire society. But due to this legislation that we've passed, which is single-payer health care legislation, whatever the case may be, Bernice is now able to visit her grandchildren and is expected to live a full and loving life. And Bernice, I just wanted to tell you we're very happy to have you here this evening. And every single person who watched that, me included, conservative, super gladiator warrior myself, looked at that woman and said, well, I don't want that woman to die. I don't want her to die. I don't want her to die. So, okay, whatever, let's do it. But What we didn't see when we're looking at Bernice is we didn't see the millions of people who are going to die because of healthcare that eventually gets rationed. We didn't see the nightmares of the national healthcare system in Great Britain. We didn't see all the people that were going to be taken off of healthcare by all these ridiculous mandates. Like my personal insurance coverage includes mammograms and birth control pills. And it costs money, but I have it. Thank you, Mr. Whittle. And all of the consequences of this are not discernible because they're not real. But that woman is. And the person who understood this most fully was the most evil man who ever lived. He understood this without the slightest hesitation. Joseph Stalin said, "A single death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic." Right? It's a statistic. We argue statistics. They put a face on what they're trying to do. And most of us, even all of us in here, would say, "I don't want anything bad to happen to that woman." And we lose our ability to think rationally because of our emotional response. So if we don't start understanding the language of how this works, and if we don't understand that we need to start showing people whose lives have been ruined by socialized healthcare, and over here is a person whose life was saved by private healthcare, and here's why, we're going to lose to these weenies. And I'm tired of losing to these weenies. I don't know about you guys, but I'm done. I'm over losing these losers.